One Step Ahead by Lundquist and Beslick.
Good morning and welcome to One Step Ahead Radio.
That UK politicians are clashing over the country's commitment to climate targets that have been communicated by the new prime minister in Azerbaijan, one of the few people actually that has been present with that kind of a dignity in Azerbaijan. Saudi Arabia, long-running defense of fossil fuels, spilled over and actually got reactions from all over the world, including some countries that you would not expect to react this way on what Saudi Arabia is trying to do, which is to defend its continuous expansion of extraction of oil and gas going forward, and not really committing to anything that is related to transitioning away from the fossil fuels as was communicated earlier at the earlier COP. Now, as usually during these COP sessions, there are a number of reports coming out during these 2 weeks about the state of the world, but also about opportunities to tackle some of the challenges. And one of these reports that has been released by Global Solidarity Levies Task Force, it sounds very long, and it's a 15 countries coalition of governments supporting this work, including Colombia, Denmark, Senegal, Spain, Germany, and European Commission, African Union. They have presented, under the leadership of French economist Laurence Toubian, they presented a sort of a tax approach, how taxing different sectors could actually lead to generate funds that we need to tackle climate change. And it starts with a levy of 0.1% on equity and bond transaction, which could raise as much as $41 billion globally. Some of these levies on these transactions already exist. The UK's long-standing stamp duty on share transaction, for example, currently stands at 0.5%. A further 127 billion, it's going to be a lot of numbers now, so 127 billions per year could come from levies on shipping emission, this report suggests, an area where international discussions are already at the relative advanced stage. On aviation, policymakers have two options: either tax on jet fuel, which is of course not taxed today, or progressively rising levies on frequent flyers, the latter on which could raise as much as 121 billion. Now, there are other sources of income, and one that is very interesting that they are proposing will be a billionaire tax. I propose a new global agreement for a minimum tax rate of 2% of net assets to be paid by perhaps 3,000 ultra-rich individuals, which could raise as much as $250 billion a year. Importantly, this would not be a new levy on those already making big tax payments. Rather, it would apply as a top-up requirement for those whose annual tax contribution currently fall below 2% of their wealth. And of course, under the existing tax regimes, billionaires are able to minimize their tax requirements by borrowing against their wealth to finance spending needs rather than receiving income that will be subject to income tax. Now, this is a very interesting, and I know that, of course, the discussion about billionaires and taxing billionaires has been around for a very long time. Now, I know, James, you have also had a look at some of the lobby-related activities prior to COP, but also some of the reports that have come out from COP. And James, please welcome to the One Step Ahead Radio. And would you be kind to share with the audience a bit what your takeaway is on that lobby-related piece?
Yeah, well, thanks, Sasha. Good morning and welcome to everyone. Just before I start and jump into that, I just wanted to let everybody know who's listening that we have an easy way for you to follow One Step Ahead Radio and podcast by joining our LinkedIn newsletter, which we've launched, and we've now got hundreds of people who are following. And it enables you to get notified once a week of the new episode that's coming up every Friday, but also when we post the podcast that you can listen to again if you missed the beginning, if you missed the end, if you missed a previous episode. They're all available on our website, which is lundquist.it, but also if you search for on LinkedIn for One Step Ahead newsletter, you can sign up and you get it into your inbox every week. If you can't find it, send me a message and I'll send it to you. So just a little shout out to everyone who can who can keep up and keep in touch with what we have every week. No, coming to that lobbying thing, it's actually very interesting. I've seen Influence Map is an organization in the US that has started to track and monitor corporate lobbying and lobbying by associations, trade associations, industry groups around ESG topics, above all, obviously, related to climate. And what I came across yesterday was also an initiative in Europe done by an organization called the Ares Foundation to do something very similar, looking actually at watering down of the CSDDD directive in the European Union. And they've been looking specifically at how the financial industry in Europe has been pushing Brussels to get excluded, because in the end what happened was that they excluded the financial service industry from it. And what they did, they looked at like the individual banks and insurers in terms of their lobbying and what was presented in Brussels, and all the industry associations, and they found that the companies very often were fairly favourable, but the industry associations were particularly negative and pushed to have the industry excluded from the directive on pushing all major European companies to have to do due diligence on their social and environmental impacts through the value chain, which is a huge push that's been done. So it's interesting that the kind of visibility, the scrutiny that's been given. We'll say, companies need to step up, and everybody vocally, publicly say, we're all in favour of, sustainability, and it needn't. But then, it's interesting. So
in principle, what you're saying, James, is that you would have a situation where you have banks, individual banks, trying to support a triple D sort of a regulation, but in fact, the banking association or different associations of the banks will work against that and lobby European Union Commission to actually water down and exclude financial industry. That's basically what the case is at the table.
Stock exchanges they looked at, insurance associations, and maybe in the media what comes out is like the national position. The German government was trying to, wanted to exclude. It's very seen sort of in Brussels as a lobbying between national, governments. But actually, there's an enormous back and forth at an industry level that doesn't really get very much visibility and scrutiny. And it's interesting. I mean, Influence Map is also tracking looking at the companies that are present at COP, coming back to COP, and saying how many of those companies are actually aligned in their public policy. And they've said that 17% of the companies present at COP actually have formally aligned public policy that's aligned to COP, to the Paris Agreement and science-based targets. So there's a lot of companies there saying things, but what is actually their public policy position is something else.
It reminds me of another thing that I've been looking at for some time. It's that you have corporates that have SBTI aligned targets. They have all of the things in place. They're trying to do what they can. In the same time, the pension scheme invested for the workers that actually work in these companies do not adhere to anything of this, which is a very sort of a tragic way of doing things, because then your money works completely in the opposite direction of what you as a company want to achieve. And usually it has to do with the fact that the Treasury departments of the companies that have these SBTI targets don't even understand what the climate stance of the company is, or why this is important in the way how the pension money is managed. So you have sort of one hand does not do what the other one is doing. So it's a very counterproductive, isn't it?
And the other hand, as you always remind us, is extremely big. The whole money aspect in terms of the pension is a huge impact. As well as public policy and lobbying. And I saw also someone from Unilever sharing, based on this, their own, for the first time they did a study in terms of what their climate position is compared also to all the industry groups that they're members of. And even, a company that's widely seen as virtuous and ahead of the campaign isn't aligned with all of all the associations that it's members of aren't necessarily aligned with its own climate policy. And we keep on saying, companies need to be more clear about their sustainability, advocate clearly about what it is. But as you're kind of suggesting as well, there's that idea around coherence, not just coherence at a sort of like communication level, but consistency through the organization, and all the way that it creates influence and has impacts is actually very, very deep. So
it's a bit of a tip to everybody listening, and also to because all of the professionals working in these different organizations, they have the pension schemes paid by employers. I mean, have a look at that. And if you manage to find in any sustainability integrated report so far anything about companies' own investments in a pension scheme in relation to sustainability, please let me know. I would really like to see that information, because usually it's never available. It's a very big part of how companies can make influence, not only in relation to their own sustainability targets, but actually through the impact on the financial supply chain of services, which is, as we know, very much global. James, one more thing. I mean, the headlines in COP, in relation to COP, they're very sort of a nasty from a political sort of an angle, because we have difficulties to agree, and we had these difficulties for many years. But beneath the surface, the companies are continuing to do many good things, and they are trying to address some of these things. What's your take on that?
It's this kind of crazy, very intense 2-week period that obviously has an enormous focus on the formal negotiations and what comes out. And there's been a lot of, some debate this week whether, the COP process is fit for purpose. And you have, some people saying it's the only global forum, it's the only place where everyone comes together, and at least we have something that is put together by all the countries that are party to the UN process, which is positive. And I thought I saw the French minister saying that if it hadn't been for COP, we would be on a 5-degree trajectory rather than 2.7 or whatever we are on today. So saying, don't, shoot something because it's not working, because without it would be even worse. But obviously, there's a lot of worry that, that what seems to be coming out of Baku seems to be so weak, because the positions are so far away from the developing and the rich world in terms of climate finance. But beyond that, there's an enormous wealth of people there who were brought together around climate action, the renewables industry. This is an enormous space for people to actually meet and work and share ideas about how to take forward a very positive message. And as we've said before we're on air, the economics of the energy transition is just driving this so fast that kind of the political process is almost, is a sort of is a parallel track that's going in its own direction. But the actual business world is driven by a lot of other factors that's actually keeping that going. I mean, I'm sure that's something that you.
Yes, I see that too.
You see that.
Yeah, I see, and I think it's almost fascinating to see how far political sort of a debate from the necessity of the business to transform is. But this is sort of leading us towards the end of this session of this One Step Ahead Radio. Before I end, interesting is that who are actually people that run the new U.S. energy policy, and how will that energy policy impact U.S. foreign policy, which are always two topics that are very related to each other. Now, there are two people, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum and shale magnate Harold Hamm.